this video, I'm going to share with you my current low-cost self-care practices. I have 10 practices that I want to share with you. 5 are in more of the physical, caring for your body space, and the other 5 I would associate more with mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So let's go ahead and get started with the caveat that everyone considers different things to be self-care. So what works for me in terms of self-care may not work for you or may not appeal to you at all. You can pick and choose from the practices or find your own, but I'm just sharing with you how I take care of myself in a way that doesn't involve spending a lot of money. First item is that I get enough sleep. Sleep is so important to me. I've noticed that I am a completely different person when I am lacking in sleep. I'm much more inspired, motivated, optimistic, and just resilient when I get enough sleep. In terms of my self-care practice, I try to go to bed at the same time every night. I try to wake up at the same time every morning, and if I need it, I will make some time for a power nap in the afternoon. So this is a 20 to 30 minute nap that really doesn't take too much time out of my day. I realize that napping isn't accessible for everyone, especially if you have a full-time job, but if you work from home or if you have flexible work, and you feel like you need a little bit of something in the middle of the day, I would highly recommend a nap. When you go to bed and when you wake up, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but I do try to keep things consistent and I try to make sure I have enough sleep. And I also wanted to mention that even though I've put sleep kind of in like the more physical category, that is really the foundation of my self-care practice or my self-care routine, and as well as having a positive effect on my physical state, physically restoring when I go to sleep, it also has a huge impact on my mental and emotional state. The next self-care practice I want to talk about in terms of taking care of my body is literally taking care of my body. The two main things I want to talk about are skincare and oral hygiene. When I take the time and care to do my compassionate skincare routine, and I have that video linked down below, I am training myself to view myself through a kind, compassionate, and loving lens. And that does so much for both my physical characteristics in terms of my skin, and of course this also overlaps with how I feel about myself mentally and emotionally. I leveled up my oral hygiene routine after I got Invisalign. I don't know how all of it interconnects, but I'm sure you've read that oral hygiene is a huge component of overall health, and I definitely buy into that. Skincare and oral hygiene are where I focus my attention when I think about taking care of myself and my physical body, but there might be things that you focus on that are different from mine, and that is totally okay. The third self-care practice I want to talk about is hydration. So I make sure I drink enough fluids in the day, and I do count coffee and tea as part of my fluid intake, but I know there are different types of research on that. I've just noticed that I do feel hydrated when I drink tea or coffee, and usually I tip the scale more towards tea than coffee, but having a hot beverage in the morning, a big 16-ounce mug of tea, it not only provides me with hydration, it also feels so good. It does feel like a form of self-care to have that mug beside me as I'm doing my work or as I'm editing my book. I do feel these waves of contentment when I have my hot beverage. Same thing goes for in the evening, but in the evening I stay away from caffeine and I have an herbal infusion. So hydration throughout the day is super important to me and definitely one of my forms of self-care. The fourth practice I want to talk about relates to moving my body. I sit a lot because there are a lot of things that I do at my desk, and I don't have a standing desk, nor do I want to move everything over to my kitchen counter where I could stand up to work, but I just choose not to. Instead, I move my body throughout the day. This usually entails going for a long walk or 2 shorter walks during the day. I aim for around 10,000 steps a day, but more isn't necessarily better, and I've read that 7,000 to 8,000 steps really does the same amount amount for your body as 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps isn't the gold standard or anything like that, but it's the number that works for me, that I can keep up with, that still feels good. I don't feel like I'm pushing myself too hard, and I don't feel like I'm taking it too easy. So that's my sweet spot, but yours might vary. The other thing I do is I try to get up and do some stretches every now and then. Some days I might lift some weights or do a little bit of yoga. I try to shake or dance or do some tapping. Essentially what I try to do is I try to incorporate movement throughout my day in small spurts rather than concentrating all of my movement in one part of the day. I find that really works for my body, keeps me relatively pain-free so I'm not sore the next day. But sometimes if I do a little more movement, especially by way of lifting weights or dancing, I do feel a bit of soreness for a day or two after. And then I just take it easier on myself on those days when my body is recovering. For me, it's all about listening to my body, doing more when I have more energy and less when I have less energy. But I do move my body every day, and I do consider that to be a form of self-care. And speaking of listening to my body, I have one more item I want to talk about that I've categorized as physical, but really, again, all of these categories overlap. And that is listening to my body in terms of food. There are a lot of opinions on food, and I've gone through a lot of phases with food, trying different things. Right now, I feel like I'm in a really good place with food, and what I try to do as a form of self-care, because I'm not about the shame and guilt around food anymore, I've been there, I've done that, I just want to enjoy my food thoroughly and completely. So I will listen to my body in terms of what it wants. Sometimes my body wants fruits and vegetables. Sometimes I want an apple, or sometimes I want a salad. But there are also times, maybe even an equal amount of time, when my body wants a bag of chips or a chocolate bar, and I will have that. I make sure I feed my body. It might not always be nutritious or healthy, but it is nourishing me in terms of giving me energy. I also consider the mental or emotional nourishment that comes from food. So sometimes if I want chocolate, nothing is going to do besides chocolate. I will have a little bit, just enough to satisfy what my body is calling for, and then I will move on. Next, I'm going to talk about a category of practices that I've roughly put into the mental, emotional, and spiritual health categories. But again, all of these categories overlap, and they are all like really intertwined. So the first thing I do every single day, I've done this for over 1,000 days, is write morning pages. This is a practice that I picked up when I read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and essentially the practice involves writing stream of consciousness journaling, also known as free writing, for 3 full-size pages. Julia Cameron talks about writing your pages, which is what I do, but if you have trouble writing, you can also type or use like a voice recorder. Of course, some days it is a slog. I don't really want to do it, but I always feel better once I've done it. I think I might have a video on this practice as well, and I will leave that down below so this video doesn't get too long, but morning pages is definitely a cornerstone. This practice has been so beneficial for my mental and emotional health. The next self-care bit I want to talk about is my daily reflection practice. This is a practice that I do every evening, essentially reflecting on a question that I've set at the beginning of the year that aligns with my theme for the year. This year my theme is Be Your Own Best Friend, so the question I ask myself at the end of every evening is, what does your inner best friend want to say to you today? I reflect on my day and I write a little something to myself. The question changes every year. Sometimes I even change it mid-year, but it's essentially grounded in compassion and gratitude. So this is my take on a gratitude practice, which really works for me. But again, what I consider to be self-care might not be what you consider to be self-care. So I would encourage you to find a practice that works for you. But I find that something rooted in gratitude and compassion is very helpful when it comes to self-care. The next self-care practice that I have happens roughly every 2 weeks, and that is my moon planning. Moon planning is something that I do to check in with my emotions and how I'm feeling on every new moon and every full moon. So again, roughly every 2 weeks. If you're looking for the reflection questions I ask myself on every new moon and full moon, I will link my blog post and website down below. I have some printable worksheets there that I hope to redesign at some point, but you can see what I I have for now and see if this practice works for you. I think I might also have some videos on this, although I do want to do a general moon planning video now that I've done that for I think 2 to 3 years now, and it's a practice that I plan to keep up with because I find it very helpful just to see the ups and downs of my emotions, to know that everything is transitory, nothing is permanent. All emotions, good or bad, come and go. I find that really helps me go with the flow a little bit more, and also to anticipate how I might feel during a really busy time coming up, etc. Hence the planning component. Looking ahead, seeing what I have on my calendar, and anticipating when I might feel stressed out or anxious and when I might be too busy for my liking, so I can start to pare back and to take care of myself more. This next self-care practice is super important to me, but what I love about what I'm about to share is that it is so customizable. And what I want to talk about is balancing connection time with alone time. So everyone already does this, but the self-care part of it is knowing what balance works for you. So if you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll know that I am skewed way more heavily in alone time in terms of needing more of it. Of course, I value the time I spend connecting with the people in my life, but I need to balance that with a lot of alone time, and that is huge for me in terms of self-care. Some of you may need more time connecting with people than you do alone time, and knowing that is important for your self-care as well. Maybe you want to plan more things, make sure that you have connection points with people coming up. That might be something that is really good for your mental and emotional health. For me, it's making sure that I've scheduled things with people far enough apart that I have enough time in between to be by myself, to be reflecting, to be in my own inner world. That balance for me might be very different from your balance, but again, self-care is about finding what works for you and then taking steps to move in that direction. The last item I want to talk about is also very nuanced and customizable, and that is taking some time for relaxation in the form of entertainment. I do this every single day, but what I do depends on how I'm feeling in the day. There is a huge self-care component to this where I get to choose how to spend my time relaxing and enjoying some form of entertainment. Right now for me, that looks like sci-fi novels. That is where I'm deriving a lot of my enjoyment and relaxation. But again, this can vary person to person and also within the same person. Sometimes I relax by listening to music, sometimes I like to watch sports on TV, sometimes I like to watch a movie with hubby, sometimes I like to play games on my phone. The types of entertainment that delight me are plentiful, but I have to be in the mood for each one. And the part that is self-care here is that I'm listening to myself and what I want. I'm not just doing something because someone else is doing it, someone in my life wants to do it. This is something that I want to do intrinsically. This is what will bring me joy in the moment. So I try to leave some time for that every day. Some days I might have less time, maybe just like 10-20 minutes, but some days I have more time and I'll spend hours in this space reading a good book or watching a movie. Those are all of the low-cost self-care practices that I wanted to share with you today. I know it was a lot. You don't have to do all of them. You can pick a few that work for you. What I started doing was I started integrating things slowly into my life. I probably started 8 to 10 years ago, maybe even before that in some way, but as I did more and felt better about myself, more confident, I started taking on more that made me feel better and more confident, and eventually I got to the point where I am doing all 10 of these things plus other things that I haven't shared in this video. For the time being, I would say try a couple of things, see how they make you feel. Don't be afraid to experiment and really hone in on what works for you. That is going to be it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will be back very soon with another one. Until then, please take care and bye for now.